Our last speaker for this panel would be Maziyar Faridi, who will be speaking about Theorizing a National Cinema Transnationally, Notes on Hamid Naficy's Contributions to Studies of Iranian Cinema.
Hello, everyone. Let me begin by thanking, of course, Rebecca Johnson and Danny Postel for extending this invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. And also for Shireen, really an exemplary mentor to chair this panel. I'm thrilled to be back at Northwestern and among my mentors and colleagues. What I've prepared for today has two sections. The first part is kind of about diaspora, but it also has an essayistic structure. The second part hopefully should serve as a bridge to our last panel of the day. And it focuses on Iranian cinema. Okay. I would like to start my presentation by thanking Hamid, whose works and presence have gathered us today here. And in this thanking, I'm particularly thinking about the experience of auditing my first seminar with Hamid Naficy in fall 2011. I had just arrived in the US from Iran with a single entry F1 visa to do my studies in comparative literature at Northwestern. For those of you who have not had the privilege of going through the Kafkaesque processes of the US visa application, especially for Iranians, I should add that a single entry F1 visa is a student visa with which you can enter and stay in the country for the duration of your studies, and even are allowed to leave, but without any promise of returning, of course. I came to Northwestern with a project on philosophy of translation, identity, and modernist literature. Although outside my area of study at the time, in my first quarter, I decided to sit in Hamid's seminar, Global Media, Transnational, and Accented Cinemas. The course's main objective was to problematize concepts such as national cinemas, tourism, genre cinema, and even diaspora cinema by attending to the current forms of displacement and conditions of capitalist globalization. Every Thursday, from 1 to 5 p.m., and it was a long seminar, we would watch and discuss a wide range of complex filmic texts from across the world made by refugee, expatriate, exile, immigrant, post-colonial, and transnational subjects. The carefully selected films for this course, which also constitute the foundation for Naficy's theory of accented cinema, were semiotically multi-layered and lyrically self-reflexive.
يعني بالنادي كل الناس كل واحد يرقص معه. قلتي لي مرة إذا حدا عزمك قلتي له لا ما بعرف أرقص ما ترقصي كل الليل مشان أعمل حالي. كثير انبسطت عليه.
In the rapidly shortening days of autumn, my autumn, filled with the absolute isolation of Ghurbat and the atrophic symbolic relations of a displaced subject with its surrounding world, I let myself be overwhelmed sensorially with regimes of sound and images that evoked the most intense reflections on problems of identity, material composition and decomposition of the subject, and my own status in the United States. The term atrophy, as I used it here, has its roots in Marx's analysis of subjects' alienation in relation to not only its work, but also its body in an industrial age. evolved in the writings of Benjamin on mimesis, as well as in Adorno and Horkheimer. Critique of such sensuous atrophy occupies a central position in Hamid Naficy and also Laura Mark's theorization of embodiment and haptic visuality in these examples of intercultural cinemas. The self-reflexive aspect of these films continually draws our attention to the materiality of the medium itself, the grainy photographs, writing surfaces, deteriorating celluloids, and so on.
كيف قالوا لك شو تعملي يعني بس تتجوزي او كنت عارفه؟
ما كنتش عارفه شيء.
My dear Mona, the apple of my eyes, how I miss you and long to feast my eyes on your beautiful face that brightens up my days.
كانت متجوزه يعني.
كانت متجوزه طبعا.
شو قالت لك؟
قالت لي هيك بده يصير وهذا.
When you were here, the whole house was livened up by your presence.
قالت لي شو ما بدك؟
Now it feels like the house has lost its soul. I wish this bloody war would be over soon, so you and your sisters can return, and we will all be together again like the good old days.
Formally, these films rely on what Naficy calls a distracted aesthetic of montage, juxtaposing, quote, multiple spaces, times, voices, and foci. This is how these films can evoke synesthetically a memory of material touch, not through cinematic identification, and cinematic identification is a gaze-based kind of identification, but through evoking, as Laura Marx in conversation with Hamid Naficy's work puts it, sense memories. Going back to our 2011 dark seminar room in the Anime Swift Hall, there was another, perhaps less discussed aspect of these films that captivated me, their rhythm.
Those were long, lonely evenings, long, lonely nights. There was a lot of walking through the nights of Manhattan. I don't think I have ever been as lonely.
Against the images of mostly fast-paced moving subjects, sometimes intensified by rapid cuts, the past progressive ing verbs of Mika's voiceover in the almost 3-hour long film Lost, Lost, Lost are not heading anywhere, no rush. As a spectator, I was immersed in the decelerating rhythms of these audiovisual materials, often in sharp contrast to the rhythm of life with which I was quickly trying to attune my imagined subjectivity in the US. By rhythm, I'm referring to the reformulation of the term by another faculty here at Northwestern, Damieta Torlesco, in her most recent book, The Rhythm of Images, in which she revives a pre-Socratic notion of rhythm qua manner of flowing, open to contingency. The decelerating rhythm of the multi-layered filmic text creates a caesura for the spectator, or simply throws the subject off balance against the accelerating drive of a new liberal system. In other words, I must confess, over the first few sessions of our seminar, I was at times anxiously checking my watch midway through the screenings and worried about my overdue assignments for the other seminars. Only after a few screenings was I finally able to immerse myself in the material flow of these audiovisual texts. And I think it kind of connects with Negar's presentation, because this is different from the kind of identification, visual identification that mesmerizes you. It creates this kind of sensuous atrophy. Rather, this is a sense of material touch that is transferred to you. Almost a decade later, I'm still haunted by the experience of watching and discussing these films in Hamid's seminar, and I often revisit them in my own pedagogy and research. Okay, it is fragmented, I know, but that is part of the nature of the essay. Okay. It was only after this seminar that I began engaging with Hamid's scholarship on Iranian cinema. Looking back at Naficy's rich career, I believe it is quite noteworthy that the 4 volumes of a social history of Iranian cinema published between 2011 and 2012 came after several other works on exilic and diasporic culture and media. These volumes are the culmination of about 4 decades of research on Iranian cinema. But also, I would argue that Hamid's methodological and theoretical lens, and I rather use the Persian term nazargah, is shaped by his reflection on extant and diasporic cinemas and his own status as a diasporic scholar. Nowhere is this more evident than in Naficy's self-inscription and self-reflection in the preface to the first volume of his books. And I'm going to read a long quotation from that preface. Quote, looking back at the past 4 decades, it seems clear that making, teaching, and curating and writing about films, cinema, television, and exile gave me an understanding of and helped express my own agonized and agonistic life, both at home, wherever that is, and in the world. These modernist acts of selfing, self-definition, self-expression, and self-fashioning, partly a gift of cinema and partly of exile, helped me attenuate and counter years of spectatorial passivity, self-othering, and hailing. They helped me come into individuality and self-representation and to become whole. He continues, one of the theses of this book is that selfing, self-othering, and self-representation involving film and media are simultaneously national and sociopolitical and profoundly personal and psychological, particularly for those who cross national boundaries. Several events drove home this thesis for me. One was the film festival that we heard about yesterday, the UCLA Film Festival. One was the film festival which brought to the fore for me as a migrant subject both the privileges of hybridity and its liabilities. Bilingualism, biculturalism, binationalism, and interstitial self-fashioning are gains. Rootlessness, inauthenticity, partiality, liminality, suspension, and suspicion are specters of loss. Scholars and filmmakers in exile are faced with a crucial ethical dilemma: how to stay independent, whole, and true to their own historical conditions, materials, fields of study, and professions, and not to be swayed by the forces of nation states, social formations, and political movements that want to politicize, instrumentalize, and recruit them to their causes, end quote. This critical self-inscription and self-reflexivity, itself one of the main characteristics of accented filmmaking, remains present, albeit for the most part implicitly, in the rest of the 4 volumes. Throughout his discussion of Iranian cinema, from its inception to its most recent form, Naficy shows the extent to which cinema is an integral part of the nation-state building project in Iran, while remaining quintessentially multi-ethnic and transnational. The examples are many, and you know the examples better than me. The first actuality film of Maziyar Faridi Shah in Belgium in 1900, Ardeshir Iranian Abdulhossein Sepandaz, Dokhtar Lor, the first Iranian talkie produced under the Imperial Film Company in Bombay in 1933, the alternative filmmaking of the 1960s, and the most recent works of Iranian exile and immigrant filmmakers. Naficy's books consider Iranian cinema as, quote, simultaneously local, national, transnational, and interethnic, end quote, creating an imagined nation while simultaneously critiquing it, unfolding traumas of modernity while visually and sensorially participating in modernity's production of subjects through acts of representation. These underlying threads and tensions are precisely informed by Naficy's previous theorization on accented cinema and diasporic filmmaking. Now allow me to leap forward. As we await Hamid's next project, his pioneering work continues to pave the way for the emergence of a new generation of scholars writing on Iranian cinema and beyond, and thinking about the limits of nation state. Let me quickly mention two very exciting examples from recent scholarship on Iranian cinema that build and expand on Hamid's work. Golbarg Rekab Talai's, Golbarg Rekab Talai's 2019 book, Iranian Cosmopolitanism, A Cinematic History, published in the Global Middle East series at Cambridge University Press, and Kaveh Askari's on Relaying Cinema in Mid-Century Iran, published in 2022 by University of California Press. Having the privilege of building on the works of scholars such as Naficy, my current book project, Rhythms of Relation, Decolonizing Identity in Iranian Modernism, engages in expansive acts of close reading, a selection of modern poetry and films that ultimately point to the possibility of forms of the political that do not rely and at times resist modernity's logic of sovereignty, that is to say nation-state, national identity, and even sovereign subject. Could we, for instance, read Farrokhzad's film by focusing on the aporetic signifier jozam, and that is to say leprosy, and its relationship with filmic rhythm and techniques of haptic visuality without demanding the text to respond in one way or another to the nation. At the risk of speaking for others, I would like to end by suggesting that a scholarship such as Golbarg's study of cosmopolitan spaces and cosmonational cinematic practices, or Askari's focus on transnational circulation of lost objects of cinematic modernism, or my own research on aesthetics and politics beyond sovereignty in the context of Iran, are possible precisely because of the kind of seminal work that Hamid Naficy has done over the past 4 decades, and in relation to which all of us today can situate our research. Hamid has many stories, and we all look forward to the next.
Oh, sing, Ulysses. Sing your travel. Tell where you have been. Tell what you have seen.